Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV with Bob Weeks.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and public policy. We're broadcast on KGPT, channel 26.1, also the companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me for my blog, The Voice for Liberty. That's on the internet at wichitaliberty.org. And there the motto is individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in Wichita and Kansas. So I cover things that may not be covered by other news media, or if we do cover the same news, I'll do it from the perspective of economic freedom, limited government, and individual liberty, as these are the things that are important. And these are the things that we find so often under attack by our government, be it at the federal, state, or local level. So, please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter I send 2 or 3 times a week. And if you'd like to contact me, you'll find my email address there, or just remember bob.weeks@gmail.com. Well, a novel transportation service worked very well for me on a recent trip to Washington, but Wichita doesn't seem quite ready to embrace such innovation. Well, have you heard of Uber and similar services? On its website, Uber says it is evolving the way the world moves. By seamlessly connecting riders to drivers through our smartphone apps, we make cities more accessible, opening up more possibilities for riders and more business for drivers. From our founding in 2009 to our launches in over 70 cities today, Uber's rapidly expanding global presence continues to bring people and their cities closer. Well, Uber works like this. If you want a ride, you use your smartphone and the Uber app to request a ride. And drivers who have undergone an application process and background check, drivers acknowledge your request and pick you up. And when the drop-off is made, payment is handled through the Uber app. Well, my first trip using Uber was a few weeks ago. I needed to travel from Dulles International Airport to my hotel in downtown Washington, D.C., which was a pretty long trip at nearly 27 miles. And my Uber fare was $59.50. Now, that's expensive, no doubt. And my hotel's website listed cab fare, they estimated it to be $60. A private sedan would have been $90 with reservations required in advance. So it seems like Uber is priced about the same as a regular taxi cab, but there's a big difference. The Uber fare is all-inclusive. Now, the way I elected to pay with Uber, and which I suspect is probably the easiest way, was to store my credit card with the Uber system. And as we approached my destination, I asked my driver if I could add a tip through the Uber app. Well, he said no, there's no need for that. And as he transferred my luggage to the hotel bellman, it seemed awkward not to offer a tip. But I confirmed with DC natives that's the way it is with Uber. No tipping. Yeah, no tipping. Isn't that refreshing? Aren't you tired of cab drivers extorting tips? But then you may be asking, what motivates Uber drivers to offer good customer service? Well, one factor is that customers rate their drivers through the smartphone app. And an intriguing factor is that Uber drivers also rate their passengers. Also, an Uber customer service representative followed up regarding my trip. And another thing, my Uber drivers seemed to like their job. They took pride in their clean cars and amenities. And what service it was. There are several levels of Uber service. I used Uber X, which is the least expensive. Other Uber services available in some cities include luxury cars or SUVs. And on my 3 Uber trips, the 3 cars I rode in were a Toyota Prius, a Lexus, and a Volvo. All were impeccably clean, both the cars and the polite drivers. On all 3 rides, I was offered a bottle of water. 2 cars had magazines for me to read. One had a bowl of wrapped candy on the seat next to me. Drivers asked if I was comfortable with the setting of the air conditioning. And they weren't blasting their radios, as has often been the case on some of my cab trips. In short, the Uber service was great. And while the Uber fare was the same as what my hotel estimated for a taxi fare, remember there was an important difference: no tip to the Uber driver. No need for cash, no need for a taxi driver to fumble with an awkward method of accepting credit cards. And a neat receipt was available on the Uber website and also in my email. Whenever I've asked a regular cab driver for a receipt, I've just received a blank form for me to fill in. Also, I had an estimate of the fare before I requested an Uber driver. In my case, the estimate was $60, with the actual fare at $59.50. And remember, no tipping. Uber is a neat service. So, can we get Uber here in Wichita? Well, recently Uber and Lyft, which is a similar service, they both started operations in Kansas City, Missouri. And nearly immediately, that city council passed additional regulations that make it tougher or maybe impossible for these services to operate. In Wichita, it's certain that Uber would be in violation of city ordinances. In 2012, the city passed new taxi regulations which erect and enforce substantial barriers to entering the taxicab market. Some of the most restrictive include these. Drivers must work for a company that has a central office staffed at least 40 hours per week. A taxicab company must have a dispatch system operating 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. A taxicab must have enough cabs to operate citywide service, and the city is determined that is 10 cabs, and a supervisor must be on duty at all time that cabs are operating. Well, did you hear that? A dispatch system. That's 1950s technology. Uber and similar services use smartphones. No dispatcher needed. No central office required. When you request a ride with the Uber app, you see a screen showing the available drivers nearby, along with an estimate of when the driver will arrive. And you can watch the driver's progress towards your pickup location. Now, can you do that with Wichita's cab companies with their supervisors and dispatch systems? Well, Wichita has implemented regulations regarding the hygiene and local knowledge of taxi drivers, these regulations enforced by bureaucrats. Now, how is Uber regulated? Well, first, there are the customer ratings, which are a powerful force. Then, provided with Uber receipts is a map of the route the driver took to deliver riders to their destinations. If riders are concerned that drivers are padding fares by taking roundabout routes, well, that's easy to see and resolve. And in fact, the Uber dashboard lets riders request a fare review. Can you imagine how difficult that would be in Wichita to prove that your driver padded your fare or extorted a tip? Regulation by bureaucrats or regulation by customers. There's a difference, and Wichita is served by the least effective of these, thanks to our city council. To top it off, while Wichita has regulations regarding the personal hygiene of drivers and the cleanliness of their vehicles, the city fell short in protecting customers from something really important like violent crime. After the city passed the new regulations, a passenger was raped by a taxicab driver. The Wichita Eagle reported the driver should not have received a taxi license because the new change banning registered sex offenders was not communicated to staff members doing background checks on taxi driver applicants, city officials told the Wichita Eagle. The city has fixed the problem that led to the oversight in this case, they said. So in Wichita, the regulations regarding customer service training were implemented, but the really important regulations? Lack of oversight, says the city. Which leads us to wonder, who was regulating the regulators? Now, if an Uber driver committed such a crime, the company would undoubtedly be held liable and experience a loss of reputation. But how do we hold city bureaucrats accountable for their regulatory failures? So, will Wichita consider relaxing taxicab regulations so that Wichitans might be served by a superior service like Uber? Not likely, I would say. The City Council is proud of the new and restrictive regulations. And Wichita is served by 3 taxicab companies, with 2 of them having the same owner. These companies are likely to lobby aggressively against allowing Uber and similar services in Wichita, just as taxi companies have done in other cities where Uber has started operations. And recent discussion about the future of transit in Wichita have not included services like Uber. At last week's City Council meeting, Councilmember Janet Miller, that's District 6, North Central Wichita, she spoke about baby boomers who may soon be aging and either can't drive or don't want to drive. Yet, she said, they have disposable income and want to spend it. Well, these are ideal customers for Uber. Now, Uber and similar services might not be a total replacement for traditional city bus transit, but it could help many people and could provide needed competition to the city's taxicab fleet. But it doesn't seem likely that we'll see Uber here in Wichita soon, if at all. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, at a time when Wichita City Hall needs to cultivate the trust of citizens, another incident illustrates the entrenched attitude of the city towards its citizens. Despite the proclamations of the mayor and city manager, the city needs a change of attitude towards government transparency and citizens' right to know. Here's what happened. At its May 20th, 2014 meeting, the Wichita City Council considered approval of a sublease by a company named Shannon No. 2, LLC. The subject property is a warehouse in southwest Wichita. It had received subsidy from the city under an economic development program, which is why council approval of the sublease was required. Now, the economics of the lease and its importance to public policy is an important matter. But for now, I'd like to show the attitude of the city towards government transparency and citizen participation. In the agenda packet, that's the detailed and often lengthy supplement to the council meeting agenda, some information regarding the Shannon lease was redacted, as you can see in the accompanying illustration. This piqued my interest, so I asked for the missing details. Now, the agenda packet is often made available Thursday afternoon, although sometimes it is delayed until Friday or even Monday. I sent an email message to the city's Chief Information Officer at 11:16 p.m. Thursday. Yeah, that's right, working late at night for your protection. Well, after the message worked its way through several city departments, I received the information I requested at 5:06 p.m. Monday. Since city council meetings are Tuesday morning, that left little time for research and contemplation. Well, this isn't the first time citizens have been left with little information and even less time before council meetings. I was involved in an issue in 2008 where there was little time for citizens, and council members too for that matter, to absorb information before a council meeting. About this incident, former Wichita Eagle editorial board editor Randy Brown wrote this in a letter to the Wichita Eagle. He wrote, "I'm fairly well acquainted with Bob Weeks, our extra-conservative government watchdog. It's fair to say that I agree with Weeks no more than one time in every 20 issues. But that one time is crucial to our democracy." Brown wrote, "Weeks is dead on target when he says that conducting the public's business in secret causes citizens to lose respect for government officials and corrupts the process of democracy." He was commenting on my op-ed in the Eagle titled, "TIF Public Hearing Was Bait and Switch." And Brown continued, "That's what happened when significant 11th hour changes to the already controversial and questionable tax increment financing plan for the downtown arena neighborhood were sneaked onto the Wichita City Council's Tuesday agenda, essentially under cover of Monday evening's darkness." He continued, "This may not have been a technical violation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act, but it was an aggravated assault on its spirit. Among other transgressions, we had a mockery of the public hearing process rather than an open and transparent discussion of a contentious public policy issue." Well, that was Randy Brown, the former editor of the Wichita Eagle editorial board. Well, the Wichita officials involved in this matter were council members Jeff Longwell, he represents District 5, West and North Wichita, and LaVonna Williams, that's District 1, mostly Northeast Wichita. And Longwell's behavior and attitude is part of a pattern, because in another incident in the same year, the Wichita Eagle reported, Wichita City Council members and the public got a first look at the contract that could send a $6 million loan to the owners of the Old Town Warren Theater just hours before today's scheduled vote on the matter. And that Eagle article quoted Council member Jeff Longwell thusly: "It's unlikely many residents would read the full contract even if it had been made public earlier." That's what Jeff Longwell said. And this attitude, in my experience, is common among Wichita elected officials and bureaucrats. The city, for example, formally lobbies the Kansas legislature opposing any expansion of the Kansas Open Records Act. And you may remember Councilmember LaVonna Williams from last week's episode of Wichita Liberty TV, where she told Wichitans that if they don't like the way the city is spending money, just don't go there, she said. This is an attitude problem. Well, there's another issue. The Shannon item, the approval of the lease, was placed on what's called the consent agenda. This is where items deemed to be non-controversial are voted on in bulk, perhaps 24 or more at a time. Unless a council member asks to have an item pulled for discussion and a possible vote separate from the other consent items, there will be no discussion of any of these issues. Well, in 2012, there was an issue on the consent agenda that I felt deserved discussion. I researched and prepared an article showing how for Wichita's Block 1 garage, the public allocation is now 0 parking spaces. Block 1, you may remember, is the downtown showpiece block between Douglas and William and Broadway and Topeka. The parking garage was built with taxpayer funds and was supposed to offer benefits to the public. But I had found out that the benefit would be less than what Wichitans were led to believe. So at the council meeting, then Councilmember Michael O'Donnell, now in the Kansas Senate, he asked that the item be pulled from the consent agenda and requested that I be able to present my findings to the council. But Mayor Coral Brewer and all 5 other city council members disagreed. They preferred to proceed as though the issue did not exist or was non-controversial. The message, their attitude, was that no time should be spent receiving information on this item. Well, Wichita city officials, including Mayor Coral Brewer, say they are proud of the open and transparent government they have created. But these episodes and others I've described at wichitaliberty.org let everyone know that transparency is dispensed and accountability accepted at the whim of the mayor, city council, and their bureaucratic enablers. Well, why was this information redacted in the first place? And as you can see in the illustration, the city redacted a large chunk of information from the agenda packet that it made available to the public. The city did, after some time, positively respond to my request for the complete document, which begs these questions. Why did the city feel that some information needed to be kept secret? Did council members have access to the redacted information? Did any members of the public besides myself ask for the information? And importantly, how many citizens might have been discouraged from asking for the information by fear of the hassle of asking City Hall for stuff like this? Well, there's also the consideration that the citizens of Wichita are parties to this transaction. How well these incentive programs work and what effect they have on the Wichita economy is an important matter of public policy. Without relatively complete information, citizens are not in a position to make judgments. There's also the matter of cost. Often, council members and bureaucrats complain that providing information to citizens is a financial burden to the city. But in this case, I'm sure the city would have been dollars ahead if it had simply published the complete lease in the agenda packet. My request bounced around several city offices, 3 that I know of, and I imagine that each handling of my request added to the cost. Well, the City of Wichita is proud to be an open and transparent government agency, its officials say. Wichita Mayor Coral Brewer often speaks in favor of government transparency. For example, in his State of the City address for 2011, he listed as an important goal for the city this, and we must provide transparency in all that we do, he said. And when the city received an award for transparency in 2013, a city news release quoted Wichita City Manager Robert Layton as saying, "The City Council has stressed the importance of transparency for this organization. We're honored to receive a Sunny Award, and we will continue to empower and engage citizens by providing information necessary to keep them informed on the actions their government is taking on their behalf." Well, the incidents I've described above, when combined with others, demonstrate that it's easy for officials to say they value transparency and accountability. The actual delivery of that, however, is difficult for our current leaders. Despite the proclamations of the mayor and the city manager, the city needs a change of attitude towards government transparency. The incident described in this article is just one more example of a divergence between the proclamations of city officials and their actual acts. It's an attitude problem, and all City Hall has to do is get a new attitude. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Jobs are a big topic in Wichita, and it's quite likely that Wichitans will be asked to approve an increase in the sales tax, part to be used for economic development, which to city officials means jobs. So how has Wichita performed in this regard? Well, compared to peer cities, Wichita performs well in growth of local government jobs, but poorly in creating private sector jobs. I've prepared statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the United States Department of Labor. I gathered data for Wichita in two groups of peer cities. One group of cities is our visioneering peer cities. Visioneering, you may remember, is a planning effort started about 10 years ago. And the cities selected as peers for visioneering are Omaha, Kansas City, Tulsa, and Oklahoma City. A second group of cities I selected includes those cities plus cities that visioneers travel to on official visits plus a few others. And the data is annual data through the complete year 2013. Also, the presentation of the data is indexed so that each area starts at the same relative level and we can compare the relative growth over a period of years. And when we look at the growth of local government jobs, we see that Wichita does relatively well, usually in the top half of job growth compared to these peer cities. Wichita there is the dark line that stands out from the others. And looking at private sector job growth, well, there you can see that Wichita appears very near the bottom. So the private sector is growing very slowly in Wichita compared to our peers. Now, you can view these graphs at wichitaliberty.org, and in fact, I've made an interactive visualization available so that you can explore this data yourself. So, from these charts, what do we need to learn? Well, first of all, we must remember that it is the private sector that pays for government jobs and the other costs of government. When we couple slow growth of the private sector in Wichita with faster growth of local government jobs, well, we're setting the stage for even slower growth of the type of jobs that truly produce prosperity. And here's something else to notice. Wichita performs better in private sector job growth than Springfield, Illinois. Now, I chose to include that city in these charts because it's the immediate past city in which Gary Plummer worked. He was president of that city's Chamber of Commerce, and he is now president of the Wichita Metro Chamber of Commerce. Something else again. Wichita also does better than Wichita Falls, Texas. Well, I chose to add that city because it is the immediate past home of Tim Chase. He was the head of the Wichita Falls Economic Development Corporation, and he's now president of the Greater Wichita Economic Development Coalition, which is a subsidiary of the Wichita Metro Chamber and the primary organization in charge of economic development for the Wichita area. So I have to ask, Why did our city recently hire these people? The cities they worked in performed worse on a relative basis than Wichita did. But these are the people our city leaders are using to plot and plan and manage the future of the Wichita economy. So as Wichita prepares to make decisions regarding economic development, including a possible sales tax to fund economic development, we need to be aware of our recent history. Now, Wichita leaders contend that Wichita has not been able to compete in economic development with other cities because our budget for incentives is too small. But when making this argument, these leaders do not include all incentives that are available and used. 2 weeks ago, I showed you how Wichita has many different incentive programs. Some are very valuable to applicant companies and have great cost to taxpayers. You can find that article at wichitaliberty.org. But remember, Wichita and the state of Kansas have many incentive programs. The excuse made by our leaders for Wichita's poor economic performance are not valid. Well, that's it for Wichita Liberty TV for this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Bob Weeks.